Welcome everyone back to the Manage to Win podcast. Today we have Travis Eliot. Travis is a yoga teacher. He's a yoga guru of some sorts. I've done your 30-minute intro to yoga, your yoga style on YouTube. It's really cool, Travis. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and it's an honor to be with you and the Manage to Win crowd. Thanks for having me.
Right on. Well, can we, just for that Manage to Win crowd, could you do us a favor and maybe go into your background, how you got into yoga real quick?
Yeah, I grew up in North Carolina, and just, what I would describe as a normal childhood and being a normal, just dude, growing up, and was into a lot of sports, especially outdoor sports like mountain biking, some running, some surfing, lifting weights here and there. And when I was young, about the age of 9, my mom actually introduced me to meditation through meditation cassette tapes. So that's where really I would say the seed of spirituality was planted. But it wasn't until after graduating college and actually moving to Los Angeles at the age of 26 that I walked into my first yoga class in Santa Monica, California. And I was really blown away because I had this real distorted idea and really a lot of stigma as to what yoga was. And this particular class that I went to was a power yoga class. So it really kicked my ass in a way that I wasn't expecting. And the thing that I really walked away from was like, here's this way of approaching fitness that really just makes a lot of sense because it was so balanced, that you had the 4 pillars of fitness. You had strength, balance, flexibility, and stamina. And in addition to that, in addition to those physical benefits, that there were also tremendous mental benefits as well. Because at that time in my life, I was struggling with a lot of things. I was smoking a little bit, drinking a lot, doing some drugs here and there. And so I'd kind of fallen off this path of health and well-being. And so when I went to that class, I really felt like I'd found a level of calm and centeredness that I hadn't experienced since really I was probably, around that age of 10 and 11. So after I discovered this class and was really blown away from it, I just started doing it as much as I could. It was like somebody walking across a desert that was completely thirsty, and I needed to relinquish this thirst through going to yoga as much as I could. I just couldn't get enough of
it. Yeah, that's cool. Did you start just right off the bat going to yoga all the time, once a week?
Yeah, at that time I was living up in West Hollywood, and the class was down in Santa Monica, so I couldn't get there every day, and I was working at a hotel at that point in my life. So I was able to get in there usually 4 to 5 times a week, and I just got in there as much as I could. I when I say I couldn't get enough of it, I really, really mean that. Like, it just felt like I'd come home, and that it was doing things for my body and my mind that really, really, really were sending me down this newly found path of being fit, but also being happy and centered. It just felt like I'd broken into a new paradigm.
Yeah. No, that sounds right along with my very limited experience with yoga. From what I've never jumped into it like wholeheartedly like that. I always felt like I needed to, but I've gone to classes whenever I've felt really tight, or whenever I just felt like I'm all wound up and I just need to unwind and do something different. And it's been really beneficial for me to loosen up and calm down and get my head in a different space for, even if it's just that hour. It really helps out.
Yeah, for me, it's like one-stop shopping. And, I know that I understand, a lot of people that maybe are listening, or, there's just, we all have different interests and we have different natures. And some of us, need CrossFit. Some of us need to go to, jujitsu, and some of us are soccer players, and some of us haven't done anything athletic most of our lives. So we're all different. But I do feel like if you are passionate about something besides yoga, it doesn't mean that yoga can't help you. And I think, like for my mom, for example, she loves to cycle and she loves to hike. And she uses yoga as a way to help her do those things with higher quality and greater longevity. It helps her to do the things that she loves to do. So somebody like yourself that, has played like a lot of soccer, you can do the yoga so that you can keep playing soccer, and that's totally cool. It doesn't have to be the favorite thing that you do as part of your regimen, but if it can help the things that you do love to do, then to me, that's a big bonus add.
Yeah, I should have done that about 3 weeks ago after I played soccer, because the 2 days after that, I hurt my back lifting weights.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I should have put a yoga class in there. Then maybe I wouldn't have injured myself.
I was trying not to bring that up and wondering whether that was,
Yeah.
Hey, Travis, I'm kind of curious. Do you find a certain time of day works best for doing the yoga?
Well, it depends. It depends on the person. It depends on the style of yoga. They say that, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording live, but you were mentioning how, you need to do yoga, but then the day kind of gets away from you. And before you know it, you didn't get to do the yoga, and you got to make it a priority. And I have this strategy that I came up with that works really well for me, and it's called the Mmp Formula. And what it stands for is move, meditate, and then plan. And so the idea is that you move your body, and you may move your body by going out for a morning jog or by doing yoga or going to the gym to lift weights, but you move your body, you exercise. After the movement piece, then you meditate so that you get your brain and your mind working in an optimal way. And then once you got your mind calm and clear, then you go to looking at your planner. And for me, I'll always plan things out the night before. So when I go to look at the planner, it's already been planned out, but I'm just looking through the day and I'm making sure that everything is scheduled in a way that things are doable. And so if you want to make something a priority and you want to make it a non-negotiable in your life, if you put it off towards the end of the day, then it's more and more likely that things are going to come up, and then you're going to not end up doing this thing that's very important for you. So I'll front load the non-negotiables at the beginning of the day. So just from that perspective, it's recommended that you do your movement and your meditation, your plan at the beginning of the day. Now, with that said, some people aren't morning people. And also when we wake up, like we're really, really stiff or tight. And like one of my favorite times for practicing yoga at a certain phase of my life was actually doing it at 4:30 in the afternoon. I felt like the body was kind of warm and open. It wasn't too late in the day. So I was able to do the practice around 4:30 to 6, and then have a good dinner, and then settle down and get a good night's sleep. So ultimately, everybody's different. But if you're really wanting to make yoga or whatever it is a priority, I would recommend doing it first thing in the morning.
I think that's kind of interesting with that style of the yoga and then the meditation, because some of the work that we've done is studying the recent writings on habits and habit formation and how much your day is a habit, how much of what you do each day. And
as opposed to conscious thought.
Yeah. And so it strikes me that if you took that approach where you do the yoga and then you do the meditation and then you do the plan, your habit more is in that sequence. And then if I'm understanding you correctly, I kind of enter into the plan, which is pre-written, but I enter in with a clear mind instead of I'm just going through habits, which oftentimes is more reactive to circumstances. and I can be more responsive and intentional in what I'm doing because I've kind of cleared my mind instead of, okay, I got to get going on this or I got to get going on that.
And that's a very, very big important thing to address. There's a story about, you know, this guy who's really proud because he built this ladder. The ladder is symbolic of the ladder of success. So he put all this effort into building this ladder, and he's building and stacking up the rungs, and he's climbing up the ladder. And finally, when he gets to the top of the ladder, he realizes that the whole entire time the ladder was leaning up against the wrong wall. So because he didn't take time to pause, he didn't take time to clear his mind and to really get clear as to what the intention and the vision and the direction was, he did all this work and he realized when he got to the top, it was all a waste of time. So when you clear your mind, it's as if you're making sure that everything you do beyond that your ladder is leaning up against the right wall so that when you get to the top, you actually end up where you really wanted to be.
And how much does that planning, how often does that happen? Is it just every night before, or is this like I'm actually thinking about this a lot, you know, what do I want my life to look like in 5 years, 10 years? Is that the kind of stuff you're talking about, or is it more recent or what's coming up in the near future?
Yeah, there's definitely different levels to it for me. Like my approach is yeah, have the long-term vision of like, all right, where do I want to be in 10 years? Where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 3 years? Where do I want to be in 1 year? Where do I want to be in, 6 months? And where do I want to be 3 months? And where do I want to be in 1 month? So you can look at it on that bigger level. But what I'm referring to is really the daily practice. So the long-term stuff is kind of a separate thing, and so you're definitely doing that. But this is really the daily, weekly kind of like imagining that you're driving a car and it's nighttime, the headlights are beaming the light out. And so what's within this immediate future of what your headlights are illuminating right now, which is, this day and this week, and getting clear as to what those non-negotiables are. How can you be a more effective planner? Because there's this group of monks in Japan, and they are like ultra marathon runners. So they'll run 100, 150, sometimes 200 miles from one temple to the next. And they have this awesome quote that says, when you commit to nothing, you become distracted by everything. So we live in this world that's just full of distraction, and media and the 24-hour news cycle and all this stuff is, going after our attention. And if we're not clear as to what our commitments are, if we're not clear as to what our goals are, then we're going to get distracted. We're going to get pulled away from these things that really matter. So the planning is a way for you to make sure that commitment is laser sharp so that you're not being pulled away by the stuff that just doesn't matter.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've been talking with my brother a lot about meditation and a few friends. And one of the videos, my brother's a big fan of this guy named Joe Dispenza, who talks about mindfulness. Oh, you know him?
Yeah, I'm actually going to study with him in a few weeks. He's going to be in Portland, so I'm going to study with Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Oh, right on. Yeah, yeah. I drove back from Fresno last night and finally listened in full to one of the YouTube videos of his talks. And I don't remember whether it was in that video or a previous one, but he talked about how he or someone else talked about how there's just a finite amount of attention span, I guess, or informational capacity in your brain at any one time or over the long term. And you have to really pay attention to what you're putting in it and what it's producing for you, the feelings and the emotions and the information that's going in there. And it just struck me that, how much junk is really going into my head and how much of it is actually helping me. it really it made me ask the question with the news. So, you know, we all love to look at the news because it just riles us up and gets us going with our opinions on things. It doesn't seem like it's helpful to me anymore. Like, why am I looking at this stuff? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that you want to be careful what you're putting into your physical body or what you're putting into your vehicle, we also have to look at that on the level of the senses. Like, what are we feeding our senses? You know, and if we're feeding our senses things that are disturbing and potentially violent and negative and toxic, that's going to have a profound impact on our nervous system and in our entire being. I heard that every moment of our life that there's 11 million bits of data that are having to come through the senses. So your sensors are having to process all that data. So in reality, on a deep level, is really infinite. So, you know, out of infinity, we're getting 11 million bits. So
Right.
it's true. Like, if you're not careful as to, you know, what you're feeding your senses and what you're putting in, what happens is we become a slave to these things, or we become a prisoner to these things. And then one day we realize that all this time is wasted, that we put our ladder up against the wrong wall, and we just wasted time. And we know that time is limited, and that life is also limited. So we really want to make the most out of every day and every moment. For me, you know, being an effective planner and coming back to that planner every morning after moving the body and meditating is one of the ways that I make sure that I'm steering my ship in the direction that I want to go in.
Do you ever have days where you don't have, well, first of all, 11 million bits. I mean, that really sounds like an uphill battle for artificial intelligence and our own thing, you know, but that's a different conversation. With the planner thing, I was curious. I mean, do you ever have any days where you haven't planned things out the night before and you're like, okay, you know, now I need to write some things down today for what I'm going to do?
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah. And you know, I'm a nutcase when I don't, like, my planner grounds me. So if I don't have things planned out, like, I'm just going around my apartment like a chicken with his head cut off. Like, it's not a pretty picture. And I'm like, because there's so much going on. And I think the more successful that we become in our careers and our lives, the more important it is that we're grounded within planning. So again, it's going to come back to, you know, all these opportunities and all these potential distractions. So I feel like a boat without a rudder on those days where I, you know, don't plan. So, you know, I'm not always 100% about it. And this is actually something that I implemented really this year in 2019, was doing this more on a daily basis. So I, you know, went out, bought a legitimate planner and started doing this.
Right on. Yeah, it sounds like it's obviously been very beneficial. Is this something
It,
you do in your current practice that you advise to everyone you come in contact with as well?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're somebody that wants to grow and you want to, you know, evolve within your career and in your life, you know, even if you're, you know, for example, say you don't have to worry about your career because you have somebody else in your family that's financially successful and they're able to help pay the bills, these tools are still very effective with you. You know, if you have to manage your kids and their schedules, you know, that we have these different sectors of our life. You know, we might have our career, we might have our family, we may have our own health, and then we may have our own spirituality path, whatever that is. And you know that if the career isn't something that, you know, everybody is having to do, although I imagine most of the listeners on this podcast are into that, you know, you can still plan out these other things. So yeah, I highly recommend it to people that have a desire to want to be more efficient within achieving their goals, their dreams, and their desires.
Yeah. Did you have something? I thought you were about
Yeah,
to
so
say
I mean,
something.
I'm just curious. I looked at your website. A great looking website, by the way.
Thank you.
I like the energy in the website. So TravisElliott.com. It's only one L in the Eliot, and it looks great. Be the ultimate podcast and stuff. So I'm kind of curious the work you do with different people and what type of examples you might have of someone who came in one regard, mentally, physically, whatever, emotionally, and then, where they were able to work towards, improve themselves, over time, and what type of work you do with them. I certainly want to look into it more. It looks like you're doing a lot of cool stuff.
Well, the most dramatic example of that would be some of my work that I've done in prisons. So last year I started teaching yoga in prison. I got invited along with my wife, Lauren, who's also a terrific yoga meditation teacher. We got invited to teach at a maximum security prison in the state of Maine. So we teach workshops and retreats all around the world, and we had been doing some trainings in the state of Maine, and there was an organization there called the Liberation Institute that had this yoga program going on in the state prison. So they invited us to come and teach for a couple of days these men that were doing, their yoga training. And I didn't really know the details until I showed up, but eventually I met the warden before we went in through all the security stuff. And he starts telling me how they had my yoga videos inside the prison, and they were using the yoga videos as one of the ways to rehabilitate these prisoners. And, a lot of these prisoners were ones that had committed some of the most heinous crimes, everything from murder to violent crime, armed robbery. It wasn't little crimes. This was the big leagues of crime. And eventually on that first day, we went in and we went through all these levels of security, and then we came into the room where 25 men were waiting for us to do a 2 full days of yoga. And I didn't know what to expect. So initially, it was like skydiving. It was like, being thrown into a crazy situation. I remember being unleashed into this room and being a little surprised that there wasn't like a barricade between us and them, or that they had handcuffs on. Like, I didn't know, but they were all in the open. And as soon as we came into the room, they all like basically mobbed us. And initially I had that fight, flight, freeze response. But that quickly eroded away when I saw the smiles of gratitude on their face. Some of them had tears in their eyes because it meant so much that people from the outside world were coming in to be with them and to see them not as animals, but as humans. And one of the men that I met was this guy named Michael, who had the word war tattooed across his throat. And the A was an anarchy sign. And he had a huge scar across the whole entire side of his face. And he tells me the story about how he was the most misbehaved inmate in the whole entire prison population. This particular prison had 1,000 men, so he was the worst out of them all. And because of being so bad, they threw him into solitary confinement. And when they threw him into solitary confinement, he was ready to end his life. So he tried to cut an artery on the side of his face, which is where the scar came from, by using a razor blade. And when that didn't work, he actually swallowed the razor blades.
Ugh.
And they rushed him to the hospital. And fortunately, they were able to save his life. And after they stabilized him, they put him back into solitary confinement. And this time when he came back to solitary, he realized that on the side of the cell was a computer screen behind bulletproof glass with a mouse hanging from it. And he thought, oh, that's interesting. Let me go see what's on this computer. So he goes to investigate the computer, and what he finds on the computer were these yoga videos that I had done called the Ultimate Yogi, which is a 108-day yoga program that I'd produced back in like 2012. Super high quality, very high production value.
That's what you
And
need, Dad.
so,
Yeah, well, I
yeah,
mean, he's got nothing going on. He's in solitary, 108 days. I mean,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Nothing else going on. So because of that, options are limited. He did one of the yoga practices. And he said in the middle of the yoga practice, for the first time in his life, he had heard words and language of hope and positivity, and that if you can control your mind, you can control your life. He had grown up in an environment of horrible abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse. So he had become a byproduct of his environment, which led him to become a criminal, which then took him to prison. So all of a sudden, in the middle of this yoga practice, he had this new awakening. And so he decided to do the full 108-day program. He didn't have a yoga mat. So what he did was he took the razor blade that he had tried to kill himself with, and he etched into his concrete floor a 2 by 6 foot rectangular shape the size of a yoga mat. And in the videos, everybody has the words ultimate across the top of the mat. So he carved the word ultimate at the top of the rectangle. And he proceeded to move through this entire 108-day program. Now, when he got to close to day like 90, the correctional officers, who were observing this guy, they had realized that he had completely changed. And they're like, oh my God, this horrible criminal is like now this new human being. Let's take him out of solitary and put him back into general population. And when they tried to do that, for the first time ever in the history of this prison, he begged to stay in solitary so that he could finish the 108-day program, because it meant so much to him. And he didn't even want to leave solitary because he was so blissed out in his cell
be
by doing the
distracting.
program. Exactly.
Yeah.
So eventually he finished 108 days. They released him back into general population. And then this organization, the Liberation Institute, they came in inspired by this guy, and they began to take them through a yoga teacher training. So now this guy, who is the worst criminal, he now teaches yoga to all the other prisoners. And now he's giving back to them. He's saving their lives. He's changing their lives. So this is an example of the power of these teachings of yoga.
Yeah. So, I relate to that because 40 years ago, I did cell-to-cell ministry at San Quentin prison. And, just going and talking with people who want to talk. And I remember all the security you go through, and you cannot wear jeans because they're wearing jeans, and you may not be let out if you're wearing jeans. And that you talked about going in and feeling, a threat, these guys are going to kill me or whatever, it's fear, flight or fight type of thing, but you're not a threat as an outside entity. You're a curiosity or you're an interest, but you're not a threat. You're not who they're worried about. You're not who they want to have anything to do with. If they want to get in a fight and kill somebody, they'll go do it with somebody else who's there. But, a huge credit, which I think is not widespread enough, is to those people in Maine who said, hey, we're interested in rehabilitation, rather than retribution, rather than penalty and punishment. I mean, we put so many thousands of people into prison, and we do it as punishment. We treat them like animals. In San Quentin, they would often, because they were violent, they would be on lockdown. So that means they got out once a week for a shower, and then they're fed for dinner. I remember seeing them throw it at the guards, but they would be fed a white bread sandwich with peanut butter and jelly, was dinner some nights. But there was no rehabilitation going on there, except, in the pockets where, like the ministry I was involved in, that was, doing some stuff with people, or, there were a limited number of other ones. And, these are hurt people that have hurt people, and they come from bad situations, and it doesn't do any good to treat them that way. And it's a huge expense. And,
Yeah, the warden was telling me that in the state of Maine, it costs $40,000 per inmate per year. So if you have 1,000 inmates, that I think comes out to $4 million a year. So it
no, that's
just from a
40 million.
financial,
That's 40
40
million.
million.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not 4 million.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It doesn't make, even from a financial perspective, it doesn't make sense
Right.
for these guys to go out and reoffend. It just bogs down the whole entire system. So this warden, he had an amazing story because his dad at some point was incarcerated. So he had a soft spot for incarcerated people. And he had gone and he fought in the military. So he fought over in the Middle East. And he was open, he is open to rehabilitation. So he's looking for programs that really are going to do some real transformative work for these guys so that they don't go out and reoffend. That's not a sustainable model unless you're somebody that's profiting off of that incarceration.
Yeah, no. Did you ever see the movie Brubaker with Robert Redford?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you should go back and watch Brubaker.
Okay, I'll check it out.
It's based on a true story. I think Redford may have directed it. I'm not sure, but he goes in as a prison warden into one of the most toxic prisons in like Louisiana or something like that.
Oh, I'll check that out.
It tells the story of someone who goes in and tries to make a difference.
Beautiful.
It's not the fastest moving movie in the world. Your kids may not. It's like, hey, Dad, what's with this? This is boring. But it's based on a true story. It's very touching, and our prison system's an absolute mess.
Yeah, and I think that to be able to bring light, whether it's through ministry work or yoga or a meditation or hospice care, any way that we can bring a light to these dark places, this is real important work, and it's very much needed, for the planet right now.
Well, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, Travis, I was just curious if you knew whether that prison in Maine was a publicly funded one or a privately funded one.
I don't. I'm not sure, but I would have to guess that it's probably it's a public funded because it is through the state of Maine.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, just a one-off question about that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So, we do, of course, have a huge prison population audience as part of our audience. I'm only kidding. But so do you have, that's a really great story of transformation. But what about someone who's more the average Joe or Josephine who's, come in and whether it's been a physical ailment or emotional, gotten involved in your program, and what's been the impact? Well, you got to have a lot of stories of that.
I do. I think about a workshop that I was doing in Chicago one time, and a family came. So it was a mom and dad, probably in their 60s, and they were there with their 30-year-old daughter. And I'm doing a 3-hour master class in Chicago, and the whole entire time the dad is shaking through all the poses. And I later came to find out that it was due to Parkinson's. And after the class was done, the mom and the daughter, they took me aside and they just said, how much the yoga had improved their dad's quality of life. It improved his condition of Parkinson's. And I think about, a lot of I have students that are athletes, one of those being a guy named AJ Pollock, who just got drafted from the Arizona Diamondbacks to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And, on an athletic level, what he tells me is that yoga is much more applicable to the activity of sports than being in a weight room and just doing your bench presses and your squats, because you're really moving the whole entire lengths of the bodily chain and all the ways that it's meant to be moved in. And at the same time, you're getting strong, you're also getting supple, which you don't see in a weight room. Usually in a weight room, you're going to get stronger in one area, but at the sacrifice of losing mobility and range of motion in other areas. And if you continue down that path, then your strength actually becomes a hindrance. So it really comes down to balance. And then I think about, you know, another student who is a multimillionaire and has just crushed it his whole life in terms of, in our society, what we define as success. Like, you know, he's building a new house in the best neighborhood in Los Angeles. He can buy whatever car he wants. He can go wherever he wants. And what he said is he doesn't have to answer to anybody. Nobody can say to him, no, you can't do this or you can't have this. And that can lead to the feeding of the ego and what we call the pain body, and just create more suffering in our life. So for him, through these teachings of yoga, he's found what's called the soul of money. And now he's taking his money, similar to, like, you know, a Bill and Melinda Gates, and he's using his money to do good things in the world, to help, you know, with women's education and foreign countries, to build wells, to bring water to communities that don't have access to clean water. And so these are just examples, whether it's in business or health or athletics or in a prison, where this stuff is really changing people's lives for the better.
Cool stuff. And you think about baseball, I mean, people who watch baseball, the players understand this, but people who watch it, you know, we appreciate the athleticism, but, you know, it's a very much stop and start game. I mean, you can, you know, you can play your position in the field for 30 minutes or more and really not be moving very much. And then all of a sudden, boom, you got to put it all on. And if you don't have that flexibility, I would assume you're more likely to pull all kinds of muscles, cause all kinds of problems, separate of the fact you're probably not going to move as quickly and as fluidly based on having the yoga. So that's very interesting.
And you think about it too, like the movement it has to happen from the mind and from the brain. So first the mind and the brain has to detect the stimulus that's coming from an external source. So, you know, traditionally yoga has nothing to do with yoga poses. And in the beginning, for the first few thousand years that it was in existence, it was the science of the mind. So it was really a meditation discipline to become more subtle in your awareness. And in athleticism, the more subtle your awareness is, it's like the movie The Matrix, where Keanu is like getting shot by all these people and he's able to like dodge all the bullets and like kind of slow down time, what they call the athlete zone, where you're so present, everything else goes away, time and space in a way kind of go away, and you're more subtle within your awareness to this stimulus that's coming at you, and therefore you're able to respond much more quickly and accurately than you were before. Like I remember right after I started doing yoga, playing tennis, and I'd played tennis as a kid my whole entire life. But right after doing yoga, it was like a whole other level of playing tennis, where I was like able to see the ball much more vividly, and therefore able to, play tennis on a whole other level than prior to doing the yoga, all because of the benefits that yoga and presence and mindfulness has on the mind.
That's really interesting. I remember reading decades ago about Jack Nicklaus, the professional golfer, and they said that Jack's concentration over the ball before his shot was so intense that you could be standing a short distance away and fire a gun, and he would not flinch. He would not even hear it, because he was just totally in his zone and just focused on that one thing.
And I think that's the big difference between the amateurs and the professionals. I think that the big difference is not necessarily the physicality of the athlete. It's the level of focus inside of the mind. Like there's many athletes out there that don't have the talents that other athletes have, but yet they're the ones that are at the top of their game. And the focus in yoga is one of the branches of yoga. So there's a whole branch dedicated to this word focus, and it's called dharana. And that's your ability to sustain focus on an object without losing that concentration. And that's what we're speaking about, when when we're talking about really bringing these teachings of yoga off the mat, which is really what it's all about, bringing it off the mat and into our world. So if you're a business person, the more focused you are, the more efficient you're going to be, the more successful you're going to be. If you are, a mom or a dad that's running a family, the more focused you are, the more present you're going to be with your kids, the more that they're going to feel seen and heard and loved. So this stuff that we're talking about, it translates into all aspects of life.
I think it's really interesting. I'm remembering now, of course, and now you're in trouble because I'm remembering you were talking about your daughter wanting to run cross country, play water polo, and then run track. And we were talking about that, and I was loving the water polo part, being a former water polo player, and telling you it's a transition game. But your daughter, I assume you guys do that. I mean, you and your wife are doing this, so your daughter's probably doing it. I mean, she may have an actual competitive edge simply through the mindfulness, through the focus of doing any of these sports, but in particular a transition game like water polo.
Exactly. Yeah. And she loves yoga. So she does do yoga. She goes back and forth, and we can talk about this a little more, but there's many different styles of yoga. There's Yin Yoga where you focus just on stretching, and then there's power yoga that's much more athletic. For when she was playing soccer, which she did basically from the age of 3 to 13, she just stopped playing soccer and is transitioning to these other sports. She was big into the Yin Yoga, and now she's starting to also complement the Yin Yoga, the stretching, with more of the power yoga. And yeah, it's super helpful with her game. And at the same time, I don't want to force the yoga on her. I don't want to make her do anything. So with her and my son, it's always been a detached invitation. It's like, hey, if you want to join, you can do this. But I don't want them to have a bad relationship with it. I want them to come out of it basically from a place of inspiration and love, and not because dad's saying you have to do this or you're going to be in trouble.
Travis, one of the things I want to talk to you about was the yin and the yang yoga. Can you explain that difference for our audience?
Yeah, so yin really implies an energy that is more soft and slow and deep and receptive. And yang is an energy that's much more masculine and active and fiery and strong and powerful. And of course, those of you that are listening or watching right now, you hear that those sub qualities of yin and yang, and most likely most of you are more attracted to the yang. Like the yang is kind of more exciting. Like, who doesn't want to be more strong and powerful and active and all these things? But the reality is that we need balance. And if we don't have balance, then we create imbalance. And if you have imbalance, then that's the opposite of strength, power, and wholeness. So if we really want to have true balance, which the martial artists and the Taoists and people like Bruce Lee were all about, then we need to have both. So yang styles of yoga are styles of yoga like power yoga or Ashtanga yoga, any yoga that's more athletic. So a lot of yoga out there or hot yoga, these are styles of yoga where there's a lot of movement, there's often sweat involved, there's you're flowing with your breath, it's athletic, you're moving through poses that are building strength and tone. And then on the flip side of that, we have more yin yoga. And yin yoga can be anything that includes a style of yoga where you're on the floor, you're on the ground, you're doing slow stretches, typically 3 to 5 minutes each pose. It can be gentle yoga, so real slow, mellow yoga. And then there's a style of yoga called restorative yoga, which is basically where you lay on pillows and you have props that support you. And the benefits of the yin yoga is that it activates what's called the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system has this sympathetic branch, which is our ability to fight, flight when faced with a stress. And we need this, right? The athletes need it. Our ancestors needed this to survive, to really spring into action. The problem is although the saber-toothed tigers are now gone, and most of the tribal threats are gone that our ancestors had to deal with, is that we're now encountering stress in a whole other way through traffic and through news and through challenges at work and maybe at home. We live in this perpetual state of stress, and doctors are telling us that 90% of the people that walk into their office is related to stress. So if we really want to address this idea of health and well-being, then we have to look at what are the ways that we can manage stress. And it's not so much that the stress is the issue, and we do need positive stress in our life. This is how we grow. This is how we expand. The issue is how do we respond to that stress? And so when we do a Yin Yoga practice or we meditate, what we're doing is we're activating the opposite of fight, flight, or freeze, and we're activating the parasympathetic branch. And so what happens is cortisol comes down, a stress hormone, adrenaline comes down, and now we're able to be in a place within our nervous system that can replenish itself, it can renew itself, it can restore itself, and ultimately bring us back to real balance. So in the yin practices, you're not looking to burn calories, you're not looking to build strength, you're not trying to create muscle tone. There's a whole other wisdom that's happening, and that's the wisdom of giving your body an opportunity to really come back to homeostasis.
Wow. Yeah, that's not something you hear a lot.
Well, no, exactly. You don't hear it in our society. What you hear in our society is go, go, go. You gotta be in the rat race. You gotta hustle. And although there is a time and a place to hustle, to grind, to do things, to achieve things, to move fast, to move quickly, equal to that, we have to balance that out with time in our schedule where we can have solitude, we can have quiet, we can allow ourselves time for deep thinking. Like, you're never going to be able to access deep thinking if you're stuck superficially on the surface of things. So having time to slow down, to get still, to get quiet, and to go within is very, very important. And in the beginning, it can be extremely challenging for people. As one comedian said, Anne Lamott, she said, "My mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone." Or another Zen master that described meditation as being locked in a phone booth with a schizophrenic. And guess who the schizophrenic is, right? It's you. So,
right.
In the beginning, you have to deal with your stuff. You have to deal with, the demons and the things that you've been running away from and denying. And that can be confronting with people. And ultimately in yoga, we have the warrior poses. And the warrior poses are there to teach us the ability to be courageous when we have to go within ourselves and see the things that we don't want to see. But ultimately, by seeing those things and not running away from them, we begin to gain power over them instead of them gaining power over us. And this helps us to become more free and more awake and more happy.
So Travis, I got a question. So I need to get into yoga. I believe yoga, reinforces my spiritual beliefs. It's not a religion or spiritual belief in itself. But am I correct? I mean, are there certain versions of yoga that are tied to a specific religion, or are all of them kind of just more of a mindfulness and physical type of exercise?
Yeah, this is a great question, and a question that comes up a lot. And there's a lot of confusion around it for some people. And there are you know, there are diehard Christians out there, for example, that will not touch yoga or go near yoga because they believe that it goes against their religion. And so what we have to do is we have to go back to the beginnings of yoga. And although it does come from India, in the beginning, the word yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, Y-U-J, which means to yoke. And so what these yogis in the beginning, they wanted to do was they wanted to yoke themselves to oneness. And that oneness is being one with the universe, being one with nature, being one with other people, being one with all life. It had nothing to do with being one with a certain god or goddess or anything. So they never said in the beginning, you need to become one with this particular, you know, deity or whatever it is. And they didn't even say that you needed to believe in God or the divine. But they did say that the goal of yoga is to transcend the limitations of your own ego and your own small self and come back to the big self. And so all the religions, they have this. These are all, you're using a system as a way to becoming one with a higher power. And so that has nothing to do with the religious belief. So if somebody's Christian, they can yoke themselves to Jesus or to the kingdom of heaven. If somebody is a Buddhist, they can yoke themselves to a Buddha nature. And the word Buddha just means the awakened one. Buddha never wanted his path to even become a religion. He looked at it as if it was a practice. He said, you know, be peaceful and be truthful and conduct yourself with morals and ethics and meditate by observing the breath. That's it. So it's totally open to everybody. And then at the same time, it can be religious for some people. For some people, they can turn it into a religious belief. So in some people in India that maybe come from a Hindu background, you know, they can make it religious. So for some it can be, but for a lot of us, it actually has nothing at all to do with religion.
I think it's very interesting, the yoke metaphor, because I typically think of a yoke as, you know, two oxen, not one. Although I guess a yoke could be one oxen. I typically think two oxen, and it's that power of the two, whether they're equal, unequal, you know, it's much more powerful.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up that metaphor, because that was the exact metaphor they used, except for them, it was that you're yoking the cart or the wagon to an ox. So you're yoking, and that's symbolic of you yoking yourself to something else. And that something else could be your breath. That something else could be your higher power. Or in like a physical power yoga class, what we talk about is that you're yoking your body to breath. So the breath is like the ox that's pulling the cart or your body. So that's in its purest sense what the word yoga means.
Yeah, and that's better than the metaphor I was thinking of. So my metaphor was not accurate. So that's good. I'm glad I brought that up. So, and that makes much more sense. And that's much more consistent. For instance, you brought up the Christian belief. I mean, if I'm yoking my cart to Christ, I'm not side by side with Christ. I mean, that's an unequal balance there, but obviously that's a much more powerful thing to yoke myself to. And if this clears my mind to be able to do that better. Yeah. What about like, isn't there some yoga that has like some chanting or something like that? I don't get the sense that's what you're talking about, but
Absolutely.
my naiveness, I'm sorry, but at least probably everybody's laughing who's listening. So
No, it's great. It's great because yes, there's a whole style of yoga that is involved with chanting. So actually in India, the most popular style of yoga is called Bhakti Yoga. And the word bhakti means devotion. So it's the yoga of the heart. And so the Bhakti Yoga is in a similar way that maybe a Christian is yearning to become one with Christ consciousness. A person in India, they may be yearning to become one with the divine, but for them, they say, many names, many faces, but one source. That these different deities, whether it's Ganesha, the elephant god, or Hanuman, the monkey god, that these are all just different manifestations or faces of God or goddess. So in Bhakti Yoga, they use song as a way to become one with the divine. And we see this in the Christian church, like a lot of the Christian church, we sing, right? Like we're singing to God. So that's a form of Bhakti Yoga. It's you're singing, and it's like an offering to God. If you're there and you're in the church and you're singing and you're like, God, you're judging how you sound, and you're thinking about the people around you, and you're judging the people next to you that are singing, then that's not Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is just calling out and singing out through music to the divine and offering to the divine because of your love for it and your yearning to become one with it, like bring me back to source. So you'll see it in the Christian church. You see it in all cultures and all traditions where we've used song as a way to become one with the higher power. So that's the Bhakti Yoga. It's the yoga devotion. They'll use song, but they'll also use poetry, art, and dance. And that's often where you hear, the chanting and the mantras.
Interesting. I'm glad I asked on that one. Yeah. No, go ahead, Jeff.
So Travis, how can this translate to a lot of our audience who are in a business setting?
Well, I think that, if you're in a business setting, then, your goal in business is typically to increase, your profit margins, right? So that your business is successful. And if that's the main goal in business, then we can use practices like yoga and meditation as a way to perform at our optimal best. And when we're talking about performing at our optimal best, for me, I'm talking about physically, mentally, and emotionally. You see this in athletics. You see an athlete that has a lot of talent and a lot of skills. For me, I think about Odell Beckham Jr. of the New York Giants. I think he just got traded though. But although the physical capabilities are there, the emotions wreck him and they wreck the team. So we have to think about ourselves not just as this one-dimensional, human being, but we have to think about these different levels. So if we're able to physically feel good and to be in a body that's healthy, and we have a mind that's more clear and sharp and able to experience things and make wise choices and good decisions because of clarity inside of our mind, which is another word for yoga, is clarity. And we're emotionally regulated so that when those powerful emotions like anger or fear or whatever show up, we're able to harness that and regulate that, then we're going to be in a more effective business situation. So I think that we can look at, running a business and working within the framework of a business from this yogic perspective where, ultimately, if we are successful on a myopic level, then we can become successful on a macro level within the world of our business. And by the way, just to throw out there, like I consider myself an entrepreneur. Like I have a business, I run a business. Like I actually have two companies. So I get this world of business, and instead of entrepreneurship, I call it spiritualpreneurship, because I'm dealing in the world of spirituality. And at the same time, running a business where, I too need to make money. I need to provide for my family. And I too want to increase profit margins. And I too have goals of building and growing my business, just like you and everybody listening probably does.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it sounds like that's really, everything you just said is really applicable to everyone in business. Doesn't matter what position they're in, doesn't matter where they're at. And we work a lot with leaders as well. It sounds like it's even more pressing for people who have a lot of weight on their shoulders. They have a whole organization depending on them to make the right decision. If they can't clear their heads and figure out what's most important, put a plan in place and follow it, and instead they just get distracted by anything else, that's not going to be helpful for them or the people within their circle that they're constantly having a ripple effect on.
Yeah, and they got to control their emotions too. So,
Yeah.
a lot of the work we do is understanding the behavioral styles of people and their driving forces or their motivators. You have to adjust per person. You can appeal to one person one way, but when you approach someone else, you may have to use a very different communication style or appeal to something totally different that's one of their motivators. So this mindfulness helps you be more intentional as a leader.
Exactly. And I would add to that too, like, to me, it's common sense. Like, how are you going to lead others if you can't lead yourself? Right? Like, if
Yeah.
you can't lead yourself, like you think about people that are led by their senses. They're a prisoner to their senses, or they're a prisoner to their thoughts or their emotions. If they can't lead those themselves, how are they going to lead people in their organization and in their life? And this is why I think, now it seems like the Martin Scorsese's of the entertainment world, and Ray Dalio of the financial world, and all these people that are at the top of their field are meditators. Like, they're all taking time in their day to meditate and to become more mindful, so that they can lead themselves, so that then they can go on and lead others.
Sounds great, man. I think that's, we can wrap it up with that.
Yeah, I got to wrap it up so I can go buy one of your sets over here.
Yeah. Travis, how can people connect with you, learn what you're doing? I know you're traveling a lot. Maybe they want to purchase one of your yoga teaching sets. You said you have a 108-day set that you produced a while ago. What are you working on now, and where can people connect with you?
Yeah, and I'm curious, Travis, as part of the info here is, if you take some, now I'm 62 years old, I'm in okay shape. But what would you recommend as a program for me to consider purchasing? I mean it sincerely. But we've got a lot of people, most of them not as old as me, in our audience, but we got a lot of 30-year-old, 40-year-old leaders into their 50s, whatever, who maybe have never done yoga or done very little. What's a great program for them to get into that they can make a commitment to, like your guy within the cell there in the prison cell doing 108 days? What's a program they can get into that, they can say, okay, I'm going to commit to this, and then at the end, I'm going to know whether this works for me or not?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that all my yoga programs that I offer, technically all levels, but the reality is that some of them are very athletic and strong. And it depends on the person. Like somebody like yourself who's athletic and has been an athlete, the majority of your life, I would say, yeah, jump into one of the power yoga programs like Yoga 30 for 30. Yoga 30 for 30 is great for people that only have a limited amount of time. Basically, that program's 30 minutes a day for 30 days. And then my other program that's probably my most well-known program is called the Ultimate Yogi. It's 60 minutes a day for 108 days. But the big thing that I would recommend, really, the best place to go to is to go to Inner Dimension TV, which is our monthly streaming service that we offer. So it's like the Netflix of yoga, meditation, and I think a lot of your listeners will appreciate this, personal development. So you go to Interdimension TV, and you can just stream, and you get access to a whole library of yoga meditation. We're about to launch the personal development. There's a program in Interdimension TV that's specifically geared for beginners. So for 28 days, they can build the foundations of yoga. And then they can progress to other classes. We have everything from 20 minutes to 60 minutes. We have the different styles of yoga, the power yoga. We have the Yin Yoga. We have tons of meditation. So I'd recommend going there, and you can do a 10-day free trial. Make sure it works for you, that you like it. And then if you do, then you can continue on, and sky's the limit.
Hey, that's a no-brainer. It's only $14.95 after that.
Exactly. And, if you sign up for a year, if you feel like you really are all in, you can get it for $9.95 a month. So, we like to reward people that, want to sign up for the long haul.
All right. I like it, Dad. Is there anything else you want to ask Travis while we have him here with us?
No, I'm done. I'm signing up for the program on the interdimension. I'm busy. Don't interrupt me.
All right. Sorry about that. Travis, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Yeah, man. TravisElliot.com, everyone, if you want to check it out.